HQ, presented by Geico. Pete Prisco gave the Commanders an A+ for their draft, which began with Jaden Daniels. Then they added a trio of players in the second round, including Illinois defensive tackle Johnny Newton, who had a first-round grade by most. They were the only team with a perfect A+ grade for Pete. Look at the other teams in the NFC East. Nobody else got an A. Eagles got a B+, Cowboys B-, Giants B-. We are going to run through the NFC East here. Pete and Brady are going to ask the biggest questions remaining for all these teams. We're going to start with the Commanders, and with Brady, he's going to start right there with their #2 overall pick.
Yeah, I really feel like this team can be one of the surprise teams this year. Maybe I'm bullish on them in part because, like Pete, I think they had an awesome draft and really a good offseason, helping to bolster their offensive line, helping to give Jaden Daniels some playmakers as well. I think he's a good pairing with their offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. Dan Quinn's a good head coach, and I think you'll see that not only in the way they play defense, but overall the way he's going to be able to get this group back in the right direction. So the real question that I have going into this season for the new era for Washington Commanders is, how fast can Jaden Daniels become the player we think he's going to be, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate question. I think he's going to be special, but in order to be special, you got to be protected. And one of the major concerns of that team last year was the offensive line. Now, they've addressed it on some spots. The one concern is left tackle. It remains. It's a major concern. Cornelius Lucas, the veteran, is scheduled to be the starter. They drafted Brandon Coleman. I think he's going to push him right out of the gate to be the starting left tackle. That's a big responsibility for a young guy, particularly a guy who's picked where he was picked in the 3rd round. So it's a big step up. I think he can do it, but that's a position to keep an eye on for the Commanders.
All right, Commanders were the only team to get an A+ overall from Pete Prisco. When you go to the player grades, you graded the whole 1st round. The only player that I believe you gave an A+ to was Malik Neighbors, who went to the New York Giants in the top 10. The biggest question mark has to be Daniel Jones at quarterback, right?
No doubt about it. I mean, you know, they made the decision to draft the wide receiver, not make a move to get the quarterback, even though they tried. They wanted to go up and get Drake May. They didn't take a quarterback, and they sit there and they're going to go into next year with Daniel Jones. Is he healthy? That's the question. I think the question, you know, everybody always says, oh, he's coming back. That's good. Daniel Jones, the money's too much. Can he really be a good quarterback? But where is he in terms of getting back to being Daniel Jones? That's always the question. He was a guy that could move and get outside the pocket. Can he still be able to do that stuff? It's a 1-year, essentially, look-see. You know, for them, he's going to be their quarterback. It might be the decision that ultimately gets the front office in a lot of trouble or ultimately keeps them around, but how he plays is imperative to how their success will translate on the field.
Yeah, my bigger question is not even just so much focused on Daniel Jones, but where is this team as they head into 2024? You know, now we know Daniel Jones will be the starter once he's healthy around training camp time. Pete's questioning whether or not he'll be mobile enough. My question is, like, what's the ceiling? You know, can he ultimately lead this team back to the playoffs again when it's a team that's devoid of having talent like a Saquon Barkley? I love the Malik Neighbors pick. I loved it in part because they're so devoid of having a playmaker like that. They've got it now, but can they ultimately utilize him, utilize guys like Darren Waller? Has the protection improved enough? Defensively, they've definitely made some moves and helped bolster that roster, but what's that defense going to look like with Shane Bowen now calling the defense, not Wink Martindale, obviously, where they had their kind of disagreements and went their separate ways? So my general question is, are we just a year away from this entire thing being blown up and moving on and this roster turning over and maybe a new head coach? Or is this a team that gets back to what we saw from them in Brian Daboll's first year? They end up being a wild card team, a team that can make the playoffs.
Asking the biggest questions for each team in the NFC East. There are co-favorites in this division. It's the Cowboys and the Eagles. Philly locked up their 2 top wide receivers long-term. Pete, what's the biggest question moving forward for this team?
Well, our lasting image of the Eagles last year is them getting run on and run on and run on. They could, for all the assets that they put into the middle of their defensive line and draft picks they put on that defensive line and even at linebacker, they just kept getting run on. So are they going to be that much better? Jalen Carter looked like he was all-world early in the season, kind of tailed off at the end of the season. He's got to become a dominant force on the inside. They have to be stout against the run, and I think if they do, they're going to be one of those teams, if they can shake off. You know, the Super Bowl hangover is real for a loser in the Super Bowl, and it was real for them last year, and I think getting past that will be good for the Eagles.
Yeah, but look at the additions. I mean, they really focused on the defense. You bring in Bryce Huff, Devin White, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, all pieces that'll be immediate impact players. And then on the opposite side, Saquon Barkley at running back to go along with the draft class that had Will Shipley as a part of it. So clearly you see the capabilities out of the backfield next to Jalen Hurts. And that's not to mention Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, other guys who will help out that secondary. As much as they struggle to stop the run at times, the secondary got abused as well. So Howie Roseman does as good of a job as anyone at bolstering this roster to make it as competitive as it possibly can be. The only question I have is this the team that maybe we should be looking at as the favorite from the NFC to make it to the Super Bowl? They seem well positioned once again. They've got a defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio that I think will be a big improvement from what we saw last year. And obviously Kellen Moore as a play caller on offense, which is a big improvement from Brian Johnson. So to me, I'm bullish on the Eagles. I think this will be a year where they get back to the Super Bowl. Maybe we see a rematch of them playing the Kansas City Chiefs again. Maybe it's Pete's Cincinnati Bengals or Buffalo Bills, whoever else he wants to throw his hat in the ring. It's kind of the flavor of the week sometimes with Pete. But I do think the Eagles will end up being maybe the best team in the NFC with this roster.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Eagles, you got the fans have to be a lot more excited there than they are down in Dallas. Now, they're co-favorites in this division, but the Eagles did all that. You guys mentioned it, all the stuff they did. What have the Cowboys done besides bringing back Zeke, who appears to be the guy at running back at 29 years old this summer?
Which is why the biggest question for them is their running back position. They should have drafted a young runner and stuck him in there. They have some guys that they like, but I mean, it's a problem area for them. They have addressed, though, the offensive line. At least they did that in the draft, which I think was smart. Now you can, have a different variations. They're going to probably try BB at center. They drafted him in the 3rd round. He played tackle at Kansas State. I think he can move into center. So I think that's important for them. They drafted the tackle. Now they can play him at left tackle and not have to move Tyler Smith from left guard, where he's an all-pro, to left tackle. So I think the offensive line will be good. It's just a matter of who's going to run the ball. Zeke Elliott, we saw last year, is a spot duty guy. That's all he is. So they have to find a way to run the football, and I don't know if that answer's on the roster yet.
I got a bigger question than that. I think is this a make or break year for Mike McCarthy and Dak? I mean, the reality is Dak is going into the final year of his deal. He's set to become a free agent. So we'll see how that continues over the course of this summer if they get an extension done with him. CeeDee Lamb is looking for a new deal. That's only going to get more pricey as we see guys like Justin Jefferson or potentially Brandon Ayuk cash in on longer-term deals. And then you look at, the loss of Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders. Mike Zimmer comes in. Obviously, he's been there before. Will do a good job with the defense. But how long does that take to get up to speed? So a lot of questions. And I know Pete's kind of bullish on the moves they made, maybe in the draft, adding BB and adding Guyton. But let's not forget, Guyton was a right tackle for the majority of his time at Oklahoma, and he transitioned positions from tight end to tackle. He only started one game during his career there at left tackle. That's going to be tough if you think you're going to have a rookie starting at left tackle protecting Dak Prescott. It's a tough call. So a lot of questions to me in my mind about where this Dallas team is. Jerry Jones says they're all in. I'm not so sure with the way this offseason's worked out so far.
And we hear what Brady has to say. He thinks the Eagles are not only going to win the division, but maybe even win the NFC. Would you take the Eagles over the Cowboys too?
Oh, yeah, I would take the Eagles right now.
Okay, even though right now, even odds to win this division, both teams are plus 120. And then it's a drop down to the other two teams, Giants, Commanders, at 10-1 with win totals of 6.5.